correspondent at The Express, Christian Calgie, and the Leeds Westminster editor, Zoe Grunwald. Right, down to serious stuff then. The Guardian, Christian. And this is Sir Keir Starmer really laying out all of the mistakes, which is quite rare in politics, but in particular, that island of strangers line in the speech that became very controversial.
Yeah, it did. And this was sort of actually almost bigger a talking point in Westminster yesterday than the welfare U-turn. So Starmer said that he deeply regrets his immigration speech, in which he was accused of echoing Enoch Powell when he said that that we sort of risk becoming an island of strangers. Yes. And critics said that it sounded like Enoch Powell saying the white population will become strangers in their own country. So Keir Starmer has said, basically has blamed this on the fact he didn't read the speech properly because he was very stressed at the time because it was the same day that he'd had that firebomb attack on his old house in North London. And so he said, oh, I should have held it up to the light. And the problem is that he claims he's not blaming his advisors, but he obviously is blaming his advisors.
That's exactly what it sounds like.
It's exactly what it sounds like.
Outsources a lot of policy issues.
Again, that he doesn't know. I mean, I had a quote from Robert Jenrick saying, you know, we need a leader, not a ventriloquist. Which is quite a funny quote, right? But actually, there's a wider problem here, which is that in the last week, if you combine this with the welfare, the PIP cut U-turn, not only have we had two big U-turns, one on welfare cuts and one on the language here, but we've had him blaming his advisors. Yep. We've had briefings against the Chief Whip, briefing against the Chief of Staff, briefings against the Chancellor, and it just sort of, it's just more fuel on the fire of this sense that, oh my goodness, the government is falling apart less than a year in.
Yeah, and people want to feel like their Prime Minister's in control, he's got the reins. Doesn't feel like this, Zoe.
No, and there's been lots and lots of briefing about actually it is Keir Starmer's advisors that are holding the reins, particularly Morgan McSweeney. And I think what is really being demonstrated by this is that he had previously said he absolutely stands by this language, and now he's seemed to show a bit of contrition about it. And it just gives this sense that he is not in control. He doesn't quite know what direction he wants to take. He doesn't quite know what vision he wants to put out. And clearly, he is not even vetting the language of very, very important speeches he's been making. I mean, it's good, especially as Calgie was saying, in the context of what's happened.
Yeah, some argue, look, that he's completely out of touch with working people in this country, and that will dodge him for, well, until he really shakes up communication from Number 10. Let's move on to it's the Times, yes. EU states oppose one in, one out migrant reform. What's going on here, Zoe?
Yeah, so we know that Keir Starmer and Macron have been working on this agreement that would essentially allow Britain to send illegal migrants who cross the Channel back to France if they kind of put together this almost free movement or mobility scheme. But there's now concern from other EU states that if this goes ahead, what will essentially happen is those migrants who are sent back to France will then be sent back to other EU countries because, of course, France and the EU have this have this arrangement already. So what we're seeing now is some objections from other EU states to this bespoke plan that France and the UK were hoping to put together. And this is really the problem. You know, this is the problem with Brexit, is that as much as Keir Starmer might like to, and other Brexiteers, for example, might have said, well, we can develop our own arrangements with these EU states, we'll have more power. Actually, they all still work as one bloc, and they are not going to be happy if certain states have certain agreements and others don't, especially if it has a knock-on impact on them. So this is very, very complicated. And, of course, this was one of the key conditions that Keir Starmer said would happen if we had reopened that scheme. And now there is a question as to whether the other EU states will even allow it.
Yeah, and I remember the warnings from before the election when Keir Starmer was sort of floating something that we could end up taking. If we end up having to sign this scheme, not just with France, but with the EU as a whole, we could actually end up taking net more refugees than we're sending back. I get the argument that if you guarantee that anyone who comes over on a small boat gets instantly sent back to France, that whilst you may not reduce the numbers, you stop the criminal gangs and you stop the flows. But I think, once again, this, to me, it sort of suggests that we're getting to the end of the road of trying to fix the migrant problem with nicey sort of diplomacy and conventions and stuff, and actually we need to be a bit more radical and one-sided about it all.
OK, should we go to the Times now? This is all about Glastonbury. Rod Stewart Is he moaning about that tea time slot? Is he friends with Nigel Farage? What's the latest, Christian?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so I don't know about the tea time slot, but he has certainly come out with a very interesting line that it is time. He says we've got to give Farage a chance. He's coming across well, and he tears into Keir Starmer. He does actually, and I really like this line, which is quite rare for a major celebrity. He says it's hard for me to talk about politics because I'm extremely wealthy and I deserve to be, so a lot of it doesn't really touch me. Which is, you know what, that's actually really nice for someone to say that I don't have skin in the game, so don't take me too seriously on this. But it is interesting because I detest what Glastonbury has become, which is a sort of annual meet-up of Gale's bakery customers. And you think, how many people in his audience are avowed Lib Dems? And he's just given this interview going, maybe we should give Reform a chance.
This is the interesting thing because, you know, I don't know if people like Glastonbury will necessarily see this endorsement of Nigel Farage by Rod Stewart.
They won't see it until perhaps after they get back.
They'll be cheering for him.
They'll be taking back their chairs.
There'll be some anger. But it is very interesting. There's a bit of incoherence here.
Lib Dem supporters.
They don't even know what he said, I know. But there is a bit of incoherence here because on the one hand, he's saying we need to give Farage a chance. On the other hand, he tears into Trump, he tears into Musk, he tears into Netanyahu. Maybe a little... look
Pinch of
into
salt,
actually,
maybe.
Yeah, and also look into some voters' minds. You know, that we tend to think people are in ideological boxes, and actually a lot of people do have views that might be, you know, they might contradict each other.
Well, I've always said that about Farage, is that there are a huge amount of voters who want to back Farage but actually detest Donald Trump. And even though we in London might think that's ideologically incoherent, they don't think that. So I think it's a risk for Farage to be too close to Trump because he's so unpopular over here. As demonstrated by Rod.
I don't know what to go with next. What outrages people the most? Baggage fees at the airport or Jeff Bezos and that massive wedding?
Well,
Let's go with baggage fees, Zoe, and that's on the I newspaper.
They both annoy people because they involve extortionate sums of money, I think it's fair to say. I think, did you say baggage?
Yeah, so
okay,
baggage.
Good. So this is that potentially the UK is looking at banning the ability for airlines to charge passengers more for extra hand luggage. So
I hate this so much, and I get hit with it every time.
So you think you've got a really good price on a flight and then you click through and you get right to the end and actually you owe an extra £80 both way for
200
hand
quid in
luggage.
my case.
It's ridiculous. So they want to basically align, I believe, with EU rules to maybe stop this from happening. But obviously the counter-argument is, will this just mean that those airlines just put their prices up in the first place?
And they will do it. I'm sorry, but I morally disagree.
You disagree, and we're going to have to leave it there. You've been the best company, thank you. You've been the best company at home. Join us after a short break, thank you.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.